meaning stories that have to do with our first captain and our creation stories that extends to Big Bear, and then also across the entire San Diego range. My family is or has been in Azusa since the 1880s, permanently living. Prior to that, we moved throughout the LA Basin, and then our villages are set. And so as I introduced myself as the villager of Sasagno, where I lived almost all of my life until the last several months. The other villages in the mountains. And as I speak today and share with you a little my family history and culture, you'll understand the connectivity that we have to the mountains. Now, our name, who are we? Who are the people that live between Malibu, Aliso Viejo, Corona, and the shared Big Bear territory? Well, there's a lot of names. So one most familiar or old would be Gabrielino or Gabrielino. That was a reference to the native people who were, and they explain this in more detail, but who built the San Gabriel mission and who were kept there. And when I say kept, it's just an introduction to what was essentially slavery within the mission. So if you can trace your lineage back to the mission, that means your family either was born into the mission, married in the mission, died in the mission, or at some point baptized or lived within the mission. So that makes a distinction between some of the other names that are common today, such as Tongva and Quiche. Now, where did those names come from? Well, Tongva seems to have appeared about 100 years ago or 100 plus years ago in some writings, and then became a more common use term in the 90s. Quiche, well, I won't go into great detail as to the exact origins of when those who identify that way started it, but it has been within those last couple of decades as well. And that is a reference to those that live within the willow brush homes of the area of Whittier, where the first mission actually was established. Other names, one of the older ones is Kumine, which was used by neighboring tribes to refer to us and those that were living within the mission. And it has a reference, or it means where the water is cold or where the weather is cold, like fog. Some of our sayings and words are hard to kind of translate. They more evoke a thought or a feeling more than something specific. What else? Oh, so in my family, the oldest reference to us as a people is LA Native. Now that was said both in English and in Spanish, most often said it's LA Indian. Now I've seen documents referring to my family as LA Indians that were documents that were in Sonora when my family had went there. At least half of the family went there to work in the mines, to work in copper, and in railroads. And you can see in the documents who they are originated or who they are originals of, and it'll refer to that. That was also a term used by my grandfather's cousins. So that's my great-grandfather's brother's daughters, and they referred to ourselves as LA Indians. So that's not a term often heard, but anyone who's familiar with some of the events of the past year would understand why this name was really important. So those that are listening or are present in this room, there was a lot of debate over the use of the word LA Native or the sequence of words. And it was because we identified that way, and there was an old identification. So there are also other names, Gabrielino, Shoshone, for example, and I'm not one to debate how we identify, because we were more than 100 villages. And what was most important in how we identified was the village we were from, because the village came before the person. You were part of a village, not an individual. So if we were all from villages within the homeland, and you were to come up and I had never met you before, you would introduce yourself by where you were from. The very fact that I would be able to understand you would tell me that you're from our tribe. So it wouldn't be necessary for me to name the tribe, because we already are understanding each other. So where's your village? And then what are you called by your people? So there's a reference to where you're from and where you stay. Today, for a lot of our people, they stay in what would be a former village. But where they're from is the lineage, and that's very important. So not only to share with others, but I mean, even amongst my own tribe, it's important that we understand that, where our lineage is. Now, for me, being linked so closely to the mountains and being linked so closely to Azusa. I always had that sense of village in that way. But I had to trace my lineages too, because for most of our people, they were lost in the mission system, their culture and history in the late 1700s and early 1800s. So they became known as Gabrielinos or Gabrielinos. And now we're in this big time of identifying who we are, and there's a lot of discussion about that. But I hope that will, for those hearing my words today, will understand a little bit more about why there may be some confusion or difficult interpretations how we identify ourselves. But no matter what, we're descendants of the more than 100 villages of the areas that I described. Okay. So as far as like my family, we're a Tongva, and that is a term that we use amongst my family today. It means stone warrior. Now, I am from a warrior class, and that is a 100% accurate description of my family, because there's been 22 military veterans in my family, including myself. There's probably more from World War I. Prior to that, I can trace my lineage back, and I can see we had open conflict with the United States, with Mexico, with the Russians, and the Spanish. So my family is traceable back to 1767, 1769, and those are the birth dates of my 4 times great-grandparents, Adriano and Adriana. From there, I can trace the age generations back to my son, and we are mountain people, mountain Tongva, as we say. That name is important because, has anyone heard of Toyparina? Toyparina led the first revolt to repel the Spanish out of our territory when they were in San Gabriel. Now, there was conflict prior to that because the first mission was built down by the Rio Hondo, towards down Whittier way. But due to fires, earthquakes, floods, and constant attack from the neighboring villages, they moved to the present day San Gabriel. So that location is where everything kind of started. Now, in 1785, Toyparina, who was from the Mountain Fortress, and that's commonly how we refer to it today, organized with Nicholas Jose a revolt against the mission. And it would have been likely successful had those called neophytes by the church, those were the baptized natives, had not alerted them to that. My family was on the opposite side as well. They wouldn't join their bloodlines for a few generations down. But if you've heard of the Verdugo Hills or anything with Verdugo, they haven't descended from that side too. Those were the Spanish colonizers that came at that time. From that revolt, there were at least 6 more that had been able to document. And looking at old Spanish records, military records, references, there were 6 revolts led out of the mountains that had cooperation between Hakshavid and the Susagna, and they drew warriors as far away as the Colorado River. For those that learn about our people, they would say, well, they were traders, and traders not in the sense of maybe trading, but traders in that we traded our goods out in many different directions. You can find evidence of it in Arizona museums on reservations. You can see necklaces that will look very similar to what my son and I are wearing. That's because of the tradition that we kept. With an influence of more than 400 miles south, north, and east, and some extent even further than that, we would be seen to be a very approachable people, which was true. We weren't at war with our neighbors, but we did have a distinct warrior society. So following up on what I was saying about the Mahi, the warriors, individual warrior combat one-on-one was highly valued. So we didn't have a standing army. So each autonomous village would have had their own Mahi, and they would carry out whatever the direction of the chief and tribal elders would, council of elders would determine as far as moral and ethical laws and ways. So hope that explains a little bit more about those warrior traditions. Now to touch on it further, what survived in my family? Well, growing up for me, and I knew we were Native. but there wasn't a lot of specific discussion about it. So most of the ways that were taught without any type of distinct name or identification. We just did. So one of the warrior ways that was kept in the family was submersion in cold water. So from a very young age, my grandfather, who took me into the canyon often, would have me do different tasks with putting my hands in cold water. And that could be like going and retrieving a fishing line, it could be washing a utensil, it could be tying a fishing knot after having been in the water, eventually to full submersion. Now my uncle, my mother's twin, would take me surfing in February, and we would go out in that water until we couldn't even lift our arms, come back and do jumping jacks and up downs and sprints until we warmed up. And I tell you, it resembled a lot of military training. You could go down to Coronado in San Diego and see the SEALs doing almost the same thing. So this type of cold water interaction was to toughen and strengthen us and our focus and resolve. And our family, as I said, so many military veterans, they had endured very much. So how is this, how old is this? Well, I spoke to my grandfather's brothers, and we determined it goes back more than 200 years. And that's where we lost it. So my great-grandfather was learning this from his grandfather. So we're back in the late 1700s. So that's one tradition that continued. So I thought it was important today to just tell you a little bit about my family, about myself, what I've been doing, so that you kind of know who you're talking to, because there's a lot of people who can speak and they have a lot to offer, but what makes each person distinct? I've been involved in the Native American community for more than 30 years, and I've danced in at least 3 or 4 powwows a year since I was in my early 20s. I've been a head man twice, and I've been active in all other sorts of Natives going on during that time. I've spoken in many places, and it's always been an honor and privilege to do so, and I rather enjoy it. So at this time, I'd like to just kind of turn it back over to you guys and see what you would like to know. And you won't surprise me by your questions. I don't dodge the more difficult ones. And about any time between, first contact till now or pre-contact, I'll share with you what I know. And if I don't know it, I'll be honest with you, and I'll direct you to who might know it if I know someone.
Does anybody have any questions, both in person and Zoom?
Well, we pondered that a little bit. We'll tell you a little bit about what we do today. Having spent so much of my life in Azusa, I learned to actually walk in the East Fork. Anybody been to Azusa Canyon? Yeah. So over in the East Fork, family always were going up there, fish, hike, and camp. So my first steps were taken there. I have a picture of my grandfather now. It was really good. And I developed a real close relationship with the mountains, and not actually knowing all of my lineage at the time. So my passion for mountains, it's instinctual. So what I mean by that is that it overrides my willingness to do something. There are times, believe me, that I'm like, well, I gotta wake up today and I gotta tackle a challenge. It's happy with something fast, but I still have to work, I still have to be a father, I still have to do all of the different things. But there's something in me that just switches on and I go for it. Okay, I am the liaison for my tribe, the Gabriel Tongva San Diego Band of Mission Indians, to the Forest Service. And I'm also the cultural gatekeeper. So that means it's my responsibility to make sure any indigenous activity within the mountain range, the mountains of Azusa, actually is brought to our attention, because within those mountains are ceremonial grounds, burial grounds, and places of interest that need to be respected and protected. So even though we support indigenous movement across our homeland and also the practicing of their culture, at the same time, let's ask them to respect where they're at here. And in those mountains, we're looking at some of the last territory within our homeland that was not significant. So if you were to go up and say, well, we want to have a Tongva practice, right? And you're doing it next to a burial ground, that wouldn't be proper. So you have to know before you go. So that's part of the responsibility I had. The gatekeepers, that's what people call me, a gatekeeper. They existed prior to me being born and generations before my grandfathers were born. And during difficult times, much of our culture fell off. So we've had to resurrect it. The seeds are there, we have to grow them. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if we only exist in the past of our culture's dead. If I only repeat the songs that my ancestors sang, if I only replicate exactly how they did, acted, and lived their lives, obviously we live in different communities, then there's nothing alive about it. So we have to resurrect it. So we have to create the new songs, because the songs that we're singing that were given to us from generations ago, they were new at one time. Okay? So we have to reestablish that hierarchy, that order, and then bring that communication. So that brings us to today. Well, when I was in, I believe, second grade, I wrote my first paper on protecting the mountains with the trash and graffiti and all that. And that continued until I was in high school and introduced many of my friends to the mountains, to hiking and other things, but also protecting, doing trash cleanups. My son, who attends Azusa University, he's almost finished up, he began to take an interest through what was being provided within that school, and he created the Canyon City Environmental Project. So my son's group, and with my support and support of others, goes in and does canyon cleanups. So we do forest fire mitigation, we do canyon cleanups. So we're up there actively protecting the mountains. So that brings to the flyer, it says educate, advocate, protect. Well, I believe in educating, that's what we're doing today. I advocate when we need to step up for a specific purpose. And to protect, anyone who knows me for any length of time knows I don't really have a ceiling. So I am 100% ready to protect those mountains. They're my ancestral mountains. It's the connection I have. So Tongva Lead the Way, it's another popular hashtag that's been out today. That came about after 120,000 plus acres were lost in the Centro Mountains. And we had to get up there and we wanted to be the first ones. And I said, well, we got to lead the way. We were the First Nation people of this land. If we're third or fourth in line to get up there, it doesn't look like we're taking that role we need to take. So we were the first ones in. As soon as the gates open and we're allowed to go in the mountains, we were up there at Crystal Lake doing fire mitigation, getting rid of ladder growth, because that's where the final line was drawn to protect what was left of the mountains from the fire came. It was Crystal Lake. So that's what we're doing today. So we actively involved in protecting our homeland. We do stretch out into other areas, but primarily we stay in that lane we have, and that is the San Diego Mountains and the foot.
There's a question on the chat from Eva Rios Alvarado. They said, what are some traditional ceremony days, like holidays, that people who live on Tongva lands should know about, or that children should learn in K through 12 and people in California should be aware of?
Okay, as far as ceremonies within our tribe, I think the one that would stand out the most would be our naming ceremony. That was a significant ceremony that was created really to give identity to our young or newborn, to have that name in their own language that they're descended from. But also we had generations of those that had not been introduced in that way and been given more common names that most of us share. So the naming ceremony is probably one of the most significant. Aside from that, some ceremonies are kept within the tribe. And then I would say that it would be more than ceremony, more events. So if I were to say a place that maybe more people should know, would be Monte Tom, which is held at the Aquarium Pacific in Long Beach, the third weekend of September. And not only our tribe will be there each year, but 5 other neighboring California tribes. So you get an immersion into our songs, dance, culture. You get to see our tables. Me as a Mahe warrior, I've replicated all of our traditional weapons. I hand make our weapons and I understand their function and use. So you can come and learn about that. I'm the only weapons maker that has this lineage that's alive right now, unfortunately. And a lot of it had to be resurrected. But at a young age, I was taught to make things. And I just carried that over. that's 30 years of research for me. So if you came to the table, you can see our traditional handheld workflows, the only ones known in existence, and the only collection made by a surviving member of the tribe in existence right now. So, question, well, how did I learn to use the weapons? Well, I trained in martial arts, a lot of stick fighting, Filipino martial arts. Trained with Paul Lonewolf, he introduced me to it. It was in that full contact stick fighting environment that I began to understand our traditional weapons and to unlock their design. And we had the most advanced design work clubs of any tribe in California or in the Colorado River, Arizona regions. We're very evolved, and that goes back to what I was saying about the Mahi culture, that independent development of hand-to-hand combat is likely was developed because of that individuality trying to explore or expand on the use of war. So I would say those two things. Our naming ceremony, when it does happen, is an invitation only, but Monkey Tom would be a place to come to really get to learn about California tribal history, specifically here, our tribe in Southern California.
Awesome. What is something that, like, what is the main issue that you're focusing on right now, or main project that has to do with, you know, the preservation of Tongva history, culture, language, or just, what is like the biggest thing that you might be focusing on right now?
Elder Julia Bogany said often that our biggest focus was identity. We have to let people know we're here, that we survived, and that we're still not only recovering, but also in a sense developing and thriving. So that's the most important thing. You know, we are here. Easy to get lost. I mean, there's a couple thousand of us, you know, and there's close to what, 12 million people. So most of our homeland is developed, and there are people here from all over the world who have no knowledge that there were people here before the American and Mexican period. And they vaguely know of the Spanish and Russian incursions. So that gets complicated, right? So to most people, history started in the 1850s. But no, we've been here for a lot longer than that. And that brings a good point that the question was been asked. How long have we been here? Well, speaking to our tribal chairman, speaking to members of our tribe who are also anthropologists and who have done a lot of research in the archaeology, there seems to be a common, that's the best way to state it. In finding things our people made, they can find connections through the centuries. So how long have we been here? Well, some estimate 2,500 years, and some say as long as 9,000 years. Now, 9,000 seems a bit more accurate. And because in Azusa, there was a archaeological dig there, what is today the Rosedale project, our home development. And there were artifacts there that dated back that far. So consistent use of certain tools, and it can link us in that way. So we've been here a very long time. So like I said, most history goes back middle 1800s, and just my family alone, I could reach the 1700s. But thanks to a lot of diligent work by, archaeologists, anthropologists, and records that have been left, we can shed a little more light on that. Also, too, we were ocean going. We had big TDOTs, hunting news that traveled up and down the coast. One doesn't arrive at that technology quickly. So there had to have been a significant amount of time with our cousins, the Chumash, and developing that kind of, maritime culture as well. Yes.
Talking about identity, in the course of your life, have you always been confident or assertive in your identity? And if, well, I guess I was asking you to answer that first.
Oh, well, in high school, with my hair growing long at the time and braided and starting to talk about it, it was difficult. It was more the subject of jokes. People had a Saturday morning cartoon interpretation of Native people. And because I didn't have all of the information, so to speak, it made it more difficult. But, you know, I kind of stayed to what that connectivity was with my family and with the mountains, and just cultivated that till I was out of high school, and within a few years after that, and I went down a entirely different path. So I think the identity and my comfort level increased to the point where I said, well, this is, you know, this makes sense to me. Now I understand all of the way my family is and who I am, and I can connect the dots. Now for my son and my daughter, they were born into it. So it was not a question, you know, of having to. He was in regalia when he was born. Our traditional dress. See, one generation turned it. Yeah, and that took a lot of work, you know, a lot of research. But it wasn't easy. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, examples I could give, but as far as acceptance, even amongst our tribe, tribal dancers came out in the 90s. We weren't very visible before that. When the dancers attempted to integrate into the existing powwow culture, they were turned away. Yeah, and one significant event was in Orange County, a big powwow where they're literally partying. But it's improved. So we've had some challenging times with indigenous settlement because we were literally decimated. We went from a population of probably 25,000. If you take into account the villages were between 60 and 400, somewhere as big as 700 villagers, to maybe 600 of us in less than 8 years. And to survive anything after being invaded by the Spanish, the Russians on the outer islands, then the Mexican period, they tried to exterminate us. That was a standing order to destroy the villages. You're either integrated into the rancho to be a cheap slave labor, or you were eliminated. Then the Americans came. Wow. Not trying to. People were still being hung in the streets in the early 1900s. So to be here now, to have anything survive, it's emotional for me, even now as I'm speaking about it, because I look back over the generations that I knew, and I see where my son is, my daughter is, and I think maybe I'm a little wrong that we were able to get to this point. So as far as the identity, I have a lot of stories, but we had just the toughest road, you know, lately in the last couple of decades as we've had our identity. A lot of it's been navigating, like I said, indigenous settlement into our home. I mean, it's difficult. It would take hours to really get into that. That's a good question. And excuse me for that little emotion, because I just, you know, relived 25 years of it.
Was there ever a moment in your journey, because from what I'm gathering from what you said, is it wasn't taught to you, right? It was something that you knew existed within you to an extent, but then you had to learn, you had to do the work, which now luckily your children don't have to. So in that journey that you took, was there ever moments that you felt like giving up? And if so, what did you do to continue?
Well, I would say probably more so in this last year, because the distance between the youngest generations now that are active on and native indigenous goings on, right, is a larger gap. For me to try to explain at times why I may be less hesitant to join in with another group and movement, it's because I have prior knowledge as to what it's been like before the 20-somethings got on the scene. So while they're trying to join, I'm like, oh, wow, I've been down this path. I'll give you an example. 2 events that happened in Azusa. One was a BLM event. We were never approached. And it's not like I'm hard to find. I mean, I'm a very vocal and visible person within the tribe. We weren't asked in our own community. And when we went there, we went to introduce ourselves to say that prior to this movement, we've been here existing and surviving, but you haven't acknowledged us. You didn't invite us. You came into our village and you did not reach out to us. So I spoke up. My son saw me, son, I want to say something. And I was cordial, particularly about it. But some of the people there looked at us as almost as if we didn't belong. Then it happened again. School district. They're out there. I work for, I guess I don't have a ceiling. I work for Azusa Unified School District. Members of our school board took part in a anti-Asian hate rally, which is good. That's a good thing. But they let it out of the middle of the Rosedale development, which is a village site that contains burial grounds and ceremonial grounds that have houses sitting on it. You get the hypocrisy in that. Where there isn't a history, not saying I support all groups, especially in its struggles against a lot of the things that are really bad against, that happen in history. But where do we fit into this when people have knowledge? We're here. So when someone said you should show up at this or show up at that, I'm like thinking, I remember when people were looking at me cross-eyed at Apollo. I remember going to one of our villages. Well, we're in our village, Kuruvuku, burial ground, ceremonial areas. We're here. And a Danza group shows up and totally just blows us off in our own village. Saying this is our land, this is Aslan, and we're back. And I'm like, so for me, this last year, and it really came to a head with several things. One of them was the whole talk about a group that's in hip hop wanted to use the name LA Native. And we stepped up against that, said, no, that's an identification of us. You can't come here and just replace us with your name because this is what you want to do. That really changed me a lot, I think. And in this last year, reflecting of all the battles and things that have happened, yeah, there's times when I'm like, I'd like to wake up and be a little more normal. But I said before that instinct prevents it. I'm so protective over what is, my family lineage, what is ours, that I don't think I can do it. But you have to try to find that balance because it's like that saying, if you have different interpretations, but if you peer into the darkness long enough, it'll peer back into you. You have to get to a point where you can deal with these hard things, but still wake up every day and still be able to engage people and interact with people. And so to answer that question, this has probably been the toughest year at points where I'm like getting tired of having to go talk to people who do the indigenous hip hop video to bring awareness to resistance and all this, but then film the video in a burial ground. You know what I mean? Or I hear about people are coming in and they're misusing sage, but indigenous people are taking the sage from the mountains to use at the danza ceremonies, at the powwows. They're not asking for permission. Plus, it's illegal. It's illegal for a reason, because you let people run amok, they're going to take over everything that's up there. You change it into a park. So even now, there's this big movement now to introduce people to nature, which I support. They don't support putting tens of thousands of more people into our mountains. They don't support mass transit. It's an organization that's about that. They're led by an indigenous person. Well, we're leading that aspect of it. See what I mean? So I'm just being real, is that this is how I feel. And I've had time to digest a lot of things. So this has been the toughest year for me at times when I say, why should I just keep doing it? Because I want to, enjoy other things too in life. But it's my son, he'd have to explain what he feels, but he pushes me to keep going. But, I've gotten to the point where when it comes up the channel, when it gets to me, I'm the one that's going to drop that hammer at that point, because if it's got to me, it's already something that hasn't been resolved. That those that are working on it. So yeah, that's really like to be. Yeah, I could talk for hours about a lot of examples, but it's difficult. It's kind of like, man, you got to fight in every direction. That's what it is. People ask, so what's it like to be of your people? You know, whether you want to say Tongva, Quiche, Gabrielino, Gabrielino, Kumive, Gabrielino, Shoshone. What's it like? If you're on the front line, you wake up every morning on a swivel. What's next? You know, not everyone does that in the tribe, but there's some of us. That's how it is.
So I do notice that you are starting more education around. So and I know we need a lot more.
Speak louder, please.
Is there a way that we can spotlight?
I think we just need to be very about what's going on, how do we bring more awareness out to spotlighting, is whether
What we're doing right now is so important. Looking at the driver's board, you see names of modern towns, and you can see next to them the villages. It's a great example of how to spread awareness. Best way is to continue like this with these meetings, you know, these gatherings coming together in a circle, so that that can be shared, and then on your own, learning a little bit about what the local history is, and then supplementing that to having an opportunity to talk to us, you know, or come to our events. We have to just plant as many seeds as we can until it's enough involvement in many communities that it's easier to access. But that's broad, you know, my elder Julia Bogany, she spent a lot of time with LA Unified School District, and she was at the Pomona colleges frequently, and I spoke over there as well, and I think that's it. It's just spreading that knowledge. All of you now are receiving a vessel with that knowledge, and we'll take it. And that's the best way. It's going to take a lot of time, especially in a place such as Los Angeles, where there's a constant influx of new people coming in. So not only are you educating those who've been here for generations, but you have those that have recently arrived, you have ones to arrive. So it's just constant with us. We're not settled. If we were settled, like my friends in New Zealand or Maui, their population is small, right? And they don't have a lot of immigration people coming in, you know. So they can really revive it. They're a significant amount of population that they can do that. Well, for us, it's several thousand, and there's probably what do you think? Maybe 30 of us, 35 of us that are truly active out there. That's not a lot of groups. It starts like this.
We got a question on the chat. Dr. B asked a question. I know you typed it in, but I would love it if everybody could hear your voice. You know, feel free to unmute yourself if you don't mind and ask the question.
All right, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because I have headphones on. Sometimes they don't work so hot. My name is Francis Barella. I'm from the Haida Nation, the Raven Clan. My native name is Alida, which means sparkling early morning frost. And I'm happy to meet you, Kevin. I may have met you before, but I can't see your face, so I can't, you know, I don't know what you look like. But anyways, Kevin, I wanted to know if you were related to Julia Bogley, because I just love her so much. She was just a wonderful person. She would come speak at my class, and her personality was so endearing, and she was just so knowledgeable. And, you know, I was just heartbroken when I heard about her going to the other side. So I just wanted to know, are you a direct relative at first? I mean, I know you're related because you're Tongva or whatever, but how close were you related to Julia?
Oh, we were not related, but very close enough. She referred to me as her right-hand man.
Oh,
That silent contributor with her, and our you know, friendship and her being a mentor and elder to me spanned some 20 years. Yeah. So it was a devastating loss, because we cannot replicate what she did on a daily basis. Before the sun rose until the sun set, she was so interactive and so on the front line that I miss the daily conversations we had, and where we talked for hours.
yeah, my condolences for sure.
For those that don't know, who Julia Bagni is? Do you mind talking a little bit about her?
Oh, yeah, she's a tribal elder, very involved in culture. So I was in the tribal council. She was very well connected in education. She had been involved in not only our tribal culture, but in Native American goings-on and things that have been happening for the past, say 25, 30 years. And she had real strong relationships. She was someone that her reputation preceded her wherever she seemed to go within the state. When we lost her, it was pretty devastating. It was a shock. Because some of us maybe weren't feeling we were ready to feel that kind of hope. How do you do that? She literally would wake up before the sun and began her day, and sometimes not return until 9, 10 o'clock at night. She was everywhere. Incredible energy, big heart, cared, was strong, very strong, but knew how to communicate, knew how to reach and touch, but hold her ground too. Just love it. Yeah, it's when the tree is small, losing a large limb is significant. And that's kind of how it is with our culture keepers, our students. When we lose one, you're having to dig and say, did I learn enough today? Or did I retain enough? Because we don't have dozens of them. We have handful. So in one generation, we could be in danger of going back to prior to 30 years ago. It's a challenge. That's how important it was.
Is there any Tongva creation stories that you may know of?
Well, I think one would be significant would be the first captain, what our creation, what the significance of the first captain was, Lonewolf, and Pemookanga, which is Long Beach, and really what the ways of life should be. So I think one thing that my ancestors might have found interesting about the Catholics was that they had a 10 Commandments, so to speak, but we also had our ways, our laws of living. And one example would be like cleanliness. Bathing was very important for our people. And boy, I got a dose of that because my grandfather, every time I saw him, did you wash your face? Take a bath. He was always up on that, and all of us younger ones about that. And that was just something that was in him. But two other big things was reciprocity. We reciprocate, meaning it's not the weight of the gift or how much the worth of the gift is, the very fact that you recognize that someone has shown kindness or open door to you. So if you came to a village, you brought something, and that could be a song, that could be a gift of some sort, but it didn't have to be a lot. For me, usually I gift some tobacco and I gift sage, and the sage I handpick comes from the mountains, and it's specifically from certain areas, so there's a story with it. And from different areas, I pick specific sage for different reasons. So reciprocity just means you build a relationship. When I sit with city officials, I tell them we're going to build a relationship first, and we'll talk business. They're like, wow, I expected you to hammer me from right off the start and want to talk business right off the start. And no, you need to know who I am and who you are, and we develop a relationship, and then hopefully we can get to where we want to go. So reciprocity was big, and that's comes from that creation story. And the other thing also is not to trespass on ceremonial grounds, burial grounds, gathering areas, specific areas that are important to a specific village or family. So that goes back to what I was saying about the mountains as a gatekeeper. Don't go into areas you have not been invited to first. And being native is not an excuse to be able to just go wherever you want. If we're preserving it, right? If that's what we're trying to do. If we're trying to create a mass of native people that works as, it's just this perfect sphere of all things, then that would be different. But we're looking to save and preserve. people, who they are. So those are some things that I would say important that would come out of that. To know that reciprocity and respecting, traditional ceremonial gathering, hunting areas, places of things going on that are important to the tribe. I think that's really important. So if you have that, I think you're going to be pretty much okay. I think that's what I would tell my son, and I would tell other, people in my tribe, the young ones, that said, reciprocity, respect where you're at, know the history of where you're at, and tell me who you are as far as your lineage, your villages. Because I'm beyond the whole name thing. Know your lineage, introduce yourself the way our people did, and then we can go from there.
What are the ways, I'm just curious, the way that your community uses sage, tobacco, maybe other plants, and what are the different meanings when you give them to people?
Sage is used for a personal purification. It can be spiritual or physical, but it will also be used in other ways, such as teas, food. So there's many uses to it. Ceremonial, it's a way of depending who's giving. If it's someone of rank, they may be giving you, bestowing you a blessing. Other may be a cleansing or a way to spiritually clear you of negative energy. So as to the types, like referencing how I said I might pick it from a different area and then a different meaning. Okay, so without disclosing exactly where I'm getting the sage from, there is a place in the East Fork that I visited this same plant for nearly 30 years. And that I take for the warriors. So if we have a young person that's going into the military, into the military for basic training and all that, I'll take this and burn this for them or give it to them to skip. Also, if someone's going to take on a big challenge, we have to protect a newly found burial site that they want to build a housing project. I would give it for that. Now, this place is where there's a lot of rock, a lot of stone. That goes back to stories of Sasagno, where all the people must have turned to stone, and for the mountain fortress. This place, when the sage burns, you can smell the earth, because this place that I go is near the river. So it brings the earth, it brings the connection to the earth power. All sage grows in the earth, but in this particular place, it's a stronger connection. Now, the other one is the healing sage. Someone is not well, and they ask, they say, look, I have something, or it's physical, it could be something like maybe depression, or it could be maybe something more worse, cancer, that they want to have their culture present with them in their battle with modern medicine, assisting them. There's a place where there's a beautiful valley of mountains, and from this place you can look and see all the mountain peaks surrounding. It's near the Alpine area. It's a very calming place. The river's not far from it, and that's where I get it. So if I'm gifting you because I'm happy to see you, or because you need healing, I take the sage from that place. Now, each of these places has connections to something. Could be a village, could be other things, but something I've done for decades, and that's what determines how it is.
I have to leave for work, but what is something that I can do? What's something that you can take? I was to as a leaf. I want to just never leave. I want to be respectful about exiting. How would someone leave from your culture?
Well, they could say Yamohene, which means till we meet again, and Mea would mean golden. So we don't say goodbye, just till we see each other again. In that way, in language, in physical sense. But the very fact that you're here today, that you took the time to be here, is a form of reciprocity. And because of that, that's very important. So I'm emotional thinking about it. And I just thank you for being here and being able to come in and be wanting to be here and learn, to have a share of culture, history with you. Thank you for that.
Can you say that, say again, how do you pronounce that?
Yeah, I'm on.
Thank you.
How do you spell it?
YAH.
And we're here to
MON.
honor you too for your presence.
HEHE. I've seen the NE. HENE.
Oh, HEME.
N as in Nathan.
Thank you. No. Can we meet again?
Yes.
Not only there's no tax, but for people in general, with visibility, establishing a relationship.
Included in history from a very early time. Grammar schools. But I think it's equally important to not encapsulate us into just a part of history, but actually allow us to come out and see where we were. I think it's true. Now, are we numerous enough to be able to go everywhere? In fact, this week alone, I had to make a decision, and the decision was an easy one because we had spoken so much so far back that I committed to coming today. I was really excited to be here today. But for every one time I accept to be somewhere, there's probably 2 to 3 other times that I can't make time because of work and other things. But if we are invited enough, you know, and the right audiences, then you can take those seats and you can put them where they need to be. At some point, we can join. But it has to happen in the educational system, and that's a pretty tall order, you know. Again, missing Elder Julia, in that respect, that's hard to fill that. I mean, but I think in this way today coming together, I think it lends a lot to that because all of you that are here today, that those that are on the Zoom, you've just been given more knowledge than you probably accumulated your whole life about one specific tribe. I mean, so you're going out and you're going to become somewhat cultural experts by just being here today, but just looking at someone to speak because you didn't have access. So you take that now and that opens the doors. That's what we need that to be carried out as we develop in our relationships and, you know, bring integration with more people that are part of our culture. That kind of answers it, but yeah. And also too, for we as a tribe has responsibility, we need to be out there and be visible as much as we can. The challenge. Come to see some of our events. See us and hear us. And then you'll go there. Yeah. I know this is a lot better today in some respects with I know that I went to a few Tongva ceremonies and powwows in the last few years where we've interacted more about our culture out. And we're not asking that we be put at the podium, but just don't dismiss us. Just don't ignore us. Let us join. If you're celebrating, invite us. If we can come, we will. But that's how it's to do with education. Put us in the books. Don't shy away from it. Get real history. Complicated. But it's real and give us an opportunity. I know this is unified. I spoke at some of the schools. By the end of that hour or 2 hours, as teachers are like, you see in their eyes, and I'll go and I'm like, whoa, man, I didn't expect that. This may be conversations to have with other educators, but also understand that there's the learners and keepers, you know, of knowledge, and then there's the people who are living and breathing it. You gotta have a little both, right? You have the people that spend a lifetime, decades doing the research and earning their degrees. You gotta, include the people too, who maybe don't have all those degrees that are the ones participating in the ceremonies and dancing and creating things, building things, because we're living, capsules that are moving around with this information. And, so we can have that.
Loud and clear so they can hear you on Zoom.
I'm Victor, thank you for letting me speak here. Ask this question. So I was having a kind of conversation over the last 10 days or so, and then the subject was about, when you talked about of exposing youngsters to things that they don't really have a chance to get exposed to until later in life. How important it is to allow that. I didn't get exposed until later in life. And so I had a period of time with a little bit of anger with that. And then so I wanted to start trying to allow youngsters to get exposed. What are some healthy ways to maybe start? Or
Well, but you're referring also culturally too.
yeah, just everything.
So if I was speaking to young people, and they woken to their heritage, or that they recently found from their travel background, right? Now you're trying to figure out, how am I going to reconnect? What if they're not in one of your liminal homelands? So, I think I gave this advice to women first one time. I said, go to a powwow and hang out for a while. See what it grabs in what you feel. Because that's a starting point for a lot of people. So is Tongva, yeah, take that. But don't immediately try to find that way yet. Just go and feel the energy. And over time, your face will be recognized. And then people open up the door. You get to interact. For us, we have cleanups in the canyon. We go clean up the trash, do fire mitigation. So I have other native indigenous people that come up. Some of them are at the end of the journey. They're trying to find something to grab to. And some of them in their early 20s. After a few times of coming with us, I start to open up some of the culture with it. And they start to grab onto it. Now they're starting to hold on to something. Are they us? Well, no, they know that, we know that, there's not the same tribe. But the relationships building and the families. So we start to connect that, right? Then they start to learn, and they find a sense of belonging. So they can travel that road to when they find out where they belong. Because if you look at, like, say, it's intertribal. Now it's based off a specific culture of the Plains tribes. But you have people of all different native indigenous backgrounds that participate. And that becomes their family tribe. All right? And I've heard the same explanation, or same enlightenment coming from the Tongva community as well, or some that don't have a tribe. There's a place they can come and learn. The other thing, it's quite the opposite to what some people think. What the youth is saying, well, sometimes they're too aggressive. Well, embrace it with a code to be able to have sports in their lives, activities, physicality, being out, eating the mountain, hiking, embracing surfing, whatever it is that works for them, connects them to something. It doesn't have to be indigenous, but then you can use that as a path to getting to that part. So I've seen so many people struggle with identity and go off the wrong way because they have nothing to fall back to. That's tough. That's a tough problem,
Yeah.
So you got to find that place, and I would look within those communities You ever join us, we'll welcome you. And you can come with us. You'll hear a lot of stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you'll start to know those stories. Part of you is gonna walk with that knowledge.
Yeah.
And find it. That's what I mean, what we can offer. But from there, believe me, I have people come and say, hey, can I hike up there? Of course you can hike up there. What should I do? Well, do this. I've never hiked before. Okay, let's talk about what you need. And then now they go on a hike. It's not just a hike, which is awesome in itself, but now they're connected with our tribe and they're connecting with something that they did. That you can do. Yeah, and I think all those communities out there have to be more open to that. And I know it's complicated. People aren't always so accepting. They're protective of their cultures because of what they've been through. You heard me speaking just half hour ago, struggling with a lot of interactions. Right? How much do I give? How much do I go back? Yeah. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah. And then, first off, I went to a teacher. I work at. So, I was asking her, like, how come, like, what amount of the year that you spend on this subject? He was talking about history books, and referencing basically past tense.
Yeah.
And then so I was like, I always kind of struggle with that because it's not past tense. There's history, but with concepts of religion, right? And then trying to figure out a way to, you mentioned grammar school, not with that, like elementary school.
Yeah.
And I'm new to that whole game, starting only public education for 2 years, and not a teacher, not admin, but I'm there. And all of these things kind of synchronizing together.
Yeah.
And then being talked about today, I was talking about last night. So it's significant. But I'm trying to find a way to show that for the little ones that they can know sooner than they were to get switched on to it. And then not to kind of have it all the time, but if they were to seek it out, they would have something to find. So,
Especially at a young age, it's a big challenge. I mean, I've spoken to the lower grades before, and I have to keep a certain, understand the age group, what they can absorb, right? So you plant seeds. By the time I speak to the high school groups, oh boy, you really get going.
yeah.
But they're older, they're ready to absorb more. And then they get college, well, you really can take off. But,
Yeah.
they need some kind of a base. But I think the whole thing is finding the, that sense of pride in who they are, because I think a lot of young kids are all searching for that identity. And at times, what's mainstream in the media doesn't give everybody an opportunity to shine. It just kind of says, well, this is the predominant way of things, and this is most important. You're somewhere underneath that. That's difficult, right? There's also a lot of labels, huh? Yeah. Again, it goes back to what the question was, how do we get that? Try to get back in the education system. They have to find a few teachers that are willing to bring. That Dalton Elementary and Azusa principal was just really intrigued about a lot of things. We had a conversation. She said, that's it. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Nobody's here. We're going to do a Zoom. You're going to come speak to every teacher on campus. Yeah, so I'm staring at this. It was like a Brady Bunch moment. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, I've never done this before. I like to be, I want to see everybody. I want to see your eyes. Even with that mask, I can still tell. But I'm looking at the screen. I'm like, wow. So I'm animated. There's other things that I'm doing. They can't see all of it. Well, they can see most of it. It's not the same. But it started like that. Give you opportunity. And like they want more. We will. But yeah, you're talking about this challenge. Yeah. So you need the support. Reach out. Hopefully that's my Instagram up there. Azusa Lonewolf. You can reach out to me. Get Instagram or some other way. But again, we'll work on you, growing you, and you will be able to reach out to what you're doing. Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah, it's going to be challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Reflection. Appreciate it.
We have some students from, some student organizers from NASA in here, Native American Intertribal Student Alliance. And they've been doing a lot of work with, exactly what, we were talking about, brother, about really trying to integrate, Native history, culture, language, throughout this educational institution, right? Because, educational institutions, they played that role of erasure, right? And so if any of you from Mesa wanna, if you're down to, maybe from the top of your head, if you remember like some of those recommendations that y'all have been making to the school, like you mind sharing it with Kevin?
Well, it's nice to meet you, man. Thank you for letting me come here, for your time speaking. Appreciate the words you come with them as well. Thank you, brother. So far, what we've accomplished for sure is submitting books and getting in touch with the liaisons in the library. That's been one of the hardest, actually the easiest successes we've achieved, since the liaisons are individuals themselves. And it's not really in the way of the administration to stop that. But I feel like what we've come to a peak right now in our climax and our talent to bring awareness about the property and land here. Creating a center, a native center, support center that's come with. When the administration gets in our way, is what I'm saying, that's the little problem we've been facing. They try to subset our solutions, and give us, instead of the car, they want to give us a Fisher Price toy wagon.
Yeah.
So how do we go about going against as stalwart as we are as people, how do we challenge that? How do we go about that?
Yeah, well, that's something that, when we look at the landscape, we see a lot of more of a resistance approach. What I believe still that, though that's required at times, relationships are more important. So unveil the culture you have and win people over. So my son, his organization, we believe in inclusion. So it don't matter what your background is, identity, religion. The moment you step foot in that mountain with us, you're one of us, and we're going to go. And then we're going to share with you a little bit about our vision, but then who we are. And we build allies, right? Pretty soon we're just all on the same page. But human people tend to history of that fighting laws and to find a way to fight amongst each other. So how can we reverse that? Because you come in with the hammer first, everything looks like a nail. So you have to build relationships. So how do we do that and get around it? Put an event right in the middle of it. Gather, show the culture, let people see it. I know a lot of people have been moved by seeing, Aztec dancers for the first time. Danza moves them. Let them see powwows, let them see California traditional culture, other ways. Go out there, tell them you're welcome. Come, there's protocols, you can't jump in, start dancing. You sit, try the food, interact, meet people. You got to plant a lot of seeds because our biggest strength is relationships. We've fought with enough people. People say, well, you should fight with this group. Why? I can name 5 others I can fight with too. You want me to wake up every day and I'm going to fight every race that's been here and ethnicity that's come to my land? I'm going to fight everybody? Well, no, just fight with these people, not these. Well, these are causing some problems over here. So you got to build relationships. That doesn't mean you're soft and you're easy. It just means it's going to be a heck of a lot better. You get more views with honey. My buddy says that. But you got to let people see it. It doesn't touch them, it doesn't touch them. We still keep moving. We have other ways, right? Be strong. But you got to let people experience it. It can't always be everything's a nail on the hammer. That's one thing I tell the youth right now, don't wake up angry. If somebody's telling you to do that, a supposed elder or group, you gotta wake up angry every day, they've taught you wrong, showed you the wrong way. Okay, because you gotta have that passion first, not the anger. Or else you're gonna fight, people are gonna fight, they're gonna fight over all kinds of things. So, I would say, I needed them here. Citrus College did it. I mean, they, not only did they get a powwow, but they brought me in to be head man. That in itself was controversial. Because look how far you don't dress traditional powwow, right? There was resistance to that. So we weren't just changing the culture of the college, we had to change the culture of Native people. I don't aim to take anything away. It's just a matter of inclusion. Plus, Citrus being held within the vicinity of Society, that's my family's village. So you got to kind of get out there and introduce people, because when you start winning a lot of support, it gets easier. Because then they look around and say, "Whoa, you got a lot of people with you," And then at that point, they're like, "Maybe we better negotiate better. We better be a little more giving." It's a lot easier when someone opens the door than have to go and take it. You know what I mean? But you're doing it. It's here right now. Yeah.
About school, about class, like thinking like very much like we're having like this session, like it's really enlightening. It's like brought a lot to the table. I'm doing research right now on my family background. My relatives told me that I've got Native American in my family, so I've been going to the Goswells and going to the research on that to find out where I fit in. So it's a really good, like, you've given me like a really good foundation, like a really good starting point to jump off from. So I'll be in contact with you, like I've got your information. What's the word? It's Ya, Moon,
Yamun
Yamun Hene.
Yeah.
Ya, Moon, Hene. Okay, Yamun Hene.
Yeah.
How do you feel about us? We're trying, like this stuff isn't taught. It's on the board right there. It's not taught here at Mount Sac at all. We have an American world languages department, but this, Tongva is not one of them, right? But like, how do you feel about us? Many of us, native, but of course, not native here, to these lands. But how do you feel about us, really trying to identify these words and use them?
I think it's awesome. I mean, I really, really like it because, you're giving identity to the location, and with that, it, causes more questions and interest, you're beginning to speak a language that was nearly eliminated. Just trying to bring a revival to it amongst our own, to have those names out there. Yeah, it shows that respect and interest in those that were here for so long and still here. Yeah, it's big. It's part of the whole identity. I mean, I know when I go to Hawaii, I see all the places with Hawaiian names, and I know that's a big thing for them and my friends that are out in New Zealand. Okay. So yeah, this is really important because that's the start from there. The movement, what happened there? There's a history. I can tell you that on your board, one of the villages is Winneka, and there was a provincial chief there, very powerful chief, and got a few stories about him. But it's kind of funny, to me. He was provincial chief and pretty much controlling all those mountains there from Puente, West Covina, reached over to San Dimas and to Huyabi, which is Almani. And the priest thought they had got a long way with him. And they said that, what's one of the most important things to you is, is now you connect with this child, and be baptized and all that. He says, my biggest thing now, the biggest, challenge for me is which of my wives to keep. And they were really upset about that. So they hadn't got too far with him. But They thought it was gonna be something spiritual, you know, nah. And then I guess he laughed, and then from there, Mateo, they went to battle. Huyapi, now mine was huge, a huge village, 700. The new one. So I can go through the list and tell you a lot of stories. But yeah, sorry, you know, Azusa, we should know, Asu, grandmother saw of the village of his grandmother, where they all must have turned to stone, reference to all the stones, all the boulders. I lift boulders, by the way, if you follow me, you can see that. That's, first I like to lift everything. I competed in powerlifting, by the way. I've been on US teams, on the world championships in sport. I love it. I just love to lift everything. Even if I never competed in the championships, it still doesn't matter. I like to lift things. So I was lifting stones prior to finding a small bit of information that said that some of my ancestors in the mountain communities lifted stones not only for strength and to go, you know, but to build the ceremonial circles. So even though we're one people, we have different connections to the land. If you're an islander, a coastal person, a valley, you're from Yama. So when I found that, I was like, what if people with this stone? Maybe that's why I live stone. But if you were to go to my house and come in the front yard, if you look over, you can see a circle of stones. That's not just a yoga, a ceremonial circle, it's because I live them. See, so with every village, there's stories and chance to learn those stories. Like I just found out the location of Pemookanga. You know, searching where was the village? Gotta find the water. And after that, I gotta find the high ground. Once you've done that, you can kind of narrow it down. But yeah, there's a lot of stories with it. So by doing what you're doing, you're giving starting points. And we just need to find out what the information is. It's out there. Not all to survive, but there's enough out there. You can dig for it. You know, I'm hard on my own people when I talk to them. I hope you've done the research before you come with your heritage because I've been doing this for a long time. I'm going to see if you've just been glancing over stuff for a year on social media and now you're an expert. You know? Yeah, I search sometimes for one word or one sentence for years. Find a piece of yeah. So, yeah.
No, personally, me, I live in Tordina. By any chance, do you know, is there anything you could share specifically about Tordina?
Well, I do know that our people survived in that area late into the late 1800s. And I found some evidence that both the area of Pomona and San Dimas were rather strongholds culturally. They weren't fully brought into the mission and were able to keep it going before this overwhelming change came. They're further out, Pomona, so they would have been more connected, probably lineally speaking, village-wise with the other more desert villages. But we're close enough to the mountains to have probably been one of the 18 villages that were connected to Hapshid as far as you know, religious interaction, those things, as far as like ceremony. There is some reference to them in being involved in sending warriors to the revolts. Yeah. Would have been good land, yeah, to live. The other things keep to mind right now too. That's sort of mind starts waking up as questions get asked. Yeah, but another interesting fact with villages, you've heard me refer to one of the villages I'm descended from, but I kind of elusive a little bit about it. Well, it's because it was a place where chiefs were born. And you know, the place where Toy Karina came from. So if you research Toy Karina, you'll find she's significant to us. And my great grandparents lived alongside her. That is a very, very special place. So we don't want it to be too much like Pemookanga, Long Beach, where that place is complicated. Too many people. So, but yeah, it's a place where chiefs from the villages in the valley sent their wives to give birth.
And I was quite a journey. It's got a lot there. So my villages have a lot of stories. You guys managed to evoke a lot of emotion from it, which is good. Sometimes it's just more textbook, you know. You get a chance to, you know, hear more who the person is and share those experiences. It's pretty deep. All of the culture shares have that. Just gotta pull it out of them. You guys hit a lot of good things today. Some of them take time to develop and expand on.
We got a question online by Eva. And so Eva asks, what resources, books, websites, etc., should folks consult after today to keep planting seeds?
The first Angelinos by William Macaulay would be a good start. Because I think he did a great thing. And if you can find the book, because they don't sell it as much, he's right there at the San Diego Mission.
We have it in our library.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
That's it. And that book is so important. He did everything right, and I've spoken to him except one thing. Made it seem like we were extinct. So then he came out with the second book after you're, you know, we're still here, right? But that book itself, First Century, that book is really thorough. It, you know, again, for those of us on our journey within the tribe too, you know, to refer to that, to go back and to look and to learn from, because it will give you directions to go, you know, because you did a fine work on it. You did fine work on the research. So I would say to look towards that book first. And from there you can go. If it's here, then definitely, you know, make copies of the pages that interest you, and the villages are in there too to tell stories about it.
That's where I got those.
Yeah, and there's a lot of language, and language from many different informants. The informants were those that were interviewed and informed the churches. See, it's interesting, if not kind of difficult at the same time, is that in order to colonize us, they had to learn about us. So if you're familiar with military history, what you can do is you can have an exchange first with the people you're not sure of, but you want to use for something, or you want to invade them. So you can make overtures. And when you make overtures, you learn who's who. Who's the chief? Who's the chief talk to? How does this infrastructure work? And you start to find this out. And they recorded everything in Spanish. So after colonizing us and missionizing us, they left all of that information. Well, they didn't exterminate us, so what have we done now? We've gone back into their records and studying their information and rebirthing aspects of culture. So that's how you can use the book to do that. Tell you where to look. You know, you'll find all that information. But I would start there. There's other books, but that one specifically. Yeah.
I know now that you bring that up, right, about the information that they have to collect, and instead, we've been having conversations around changing our moniker for the school. It's a Mountie, right? And I've shared with students that, you know, some of the things that Mounties did, or mountain men, from, you know, from America specifically, because I know like there's Canadians, right? But from America specifically, you know, to my knowledge is that it's exactly what you said that they did. Like they came out, they surveyed the land, the people, they gained that intelligence, and they gave it to the U.S. Army. And I know like some of the folks here from NASA, that's one of the things that they have brought up to the school, right? Changing that, changing the Mountie because of that history, or, you know, similar history. By any chance, you know, are you aware of that, or do you have an opinion on that at all?
Well, I think that some usage of names or telling of stories or identifications, yeah, the warrant change, because the narrative that's been given about it isn't true. So, yeah, to give an example of how misdirected information can become. Pobladores, has anybody ever heard of pobladores? It's first settlers that were brought by the Spanish. Recently, someone said, well, we want to
celebrate, and then I'll backstory this. We want to celebrate the Black African settlement of California. Some of you might be going, what? Well, the pobladores, who descendants of them who are proud of Spanish heritage, weren't aware that the majority of the pobladores or settlers were also Black. And they were active participants in colonization. Willful participants. See how awkward that can become? Because we're trying to tear down the pobladores, yet someone else is saying, well, I'll take another angle and we're going to take one minority group and we're going to celebrate them. And we're like, we just reversed it back to another, you're still celebrating the colonizer. So the pobladores, their descendants do a big thing to LA every year. So we might uncover a stone we're not ready for. Because I just dropped some information you probably didn't know. And that was a shock to them when they were researching, thinking they were all razón, la raza, Spanish. And they weren't. So how do we digest that one? That's another story to unpack. So yeah, we're changing narratives, but that whole mountain man thing, I live in Redwood now, and they're gonna have mountaineer days. They're gonna gloss over the fact that there was some darkness going on with that. So we gotta look at it and say, you can't encapsulate all of them that way, but at the same time, let's take a little fresh perspective of what really happened. And I know right now some Canadian brothers and sisters are having some big problems up on their reserves, and it's the Mounties that are the forefront of that, strong arm to stand them down. Yeah. But we have to be ready for the truth when we open up certain things that we may not like what we see. Some of my fellow Californian tribes were participants as well. I'm just saying we got to be ready for that, right? That's what's important what you're talking about. When you're out there trying to tear something down, you might open up a whole other can of worms you weren't ready for, because people are out there researching too. So we have to understand the different levels of activism. Did the activism originate in the Midwest? Did it originate in the Southwest? Where did it come from? And when it's been transplanted somewhere else, does it fit seamlessly with what's happened there? You see what I mean? As you heard me say earlier about the Spanish period, the Russian incursion, the Mexican period, and the American period, well, most indigenous activists are only focused on the American period. Then they start to really hammer it, and then the other stuff comes out. And now they're like not prepared for that because they didn't do their homework. Now they're like, oh man. They might even I've had people come to me and say, wow, I've been hammering the white man all this time, and I just found out my ancestors were fighting your people. What do I do now? I'm a colonizer. And I'm like, an indigenous one? That's tough to swallow, right? Or sub-Saharan Africa. I have to make the distinction because if you know Africa, you have different groups in Africa, right? You have North, and I've been to Algeria, I've been to Morocco, firsthand, I can tell you about that. But there's different peoples. Well, who was here? Was it the first president of Mexico of African descent? So that's something that's still being hedged out. So not everyone was a slave. People were involved in different things. So we have to be aware of that when we're tearing down certain things, what we're going to step into next. Because believe me, when I look down my lineage, I see it. When I do my DNA test, confirms it. I can see. I trace some of my lines into the 1500s. And the other ones that came up through Baja Laredo, first mission, first contact with California, Lower California, and then came up. And they came into Kumeyaay land, the pie tribes, and then worked their way up here. They refer to my people as crazy, like crazy aggressive. People think we're just acorn gatherers. Yeah. But I know I might have embellished a little bit more there, but see what I mean?
No,
It's just, that's why we have to have strong leadership and to what direction we're going to go. So we understand that history is complicated.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I could speak on what I just said. I could give you hours of that in detail. Yeah, going from San Diego to here, I can do that. In fact, let me give you an idea on something. This worked two ways. When one of the Kumeyaay revolts against the Presidio in San Diego and the mission occurred, it was very successful. There was someone there that turned some events, and last name Marquez. We believed it might have been one of our family lines, so I traced it all the way back to Baja Laredo, back to the first Salvador Marquez who came from the Mediterranean, and he was an expert, he was a cannoneer. So the Spanish hired him and brought him to help conquest Baja. They needed a cannoneer, someone good with that. Well, he ends up taking a native Californian as a wife, and then he has a son, and then he takes a native Californian as a wife. And what happens is you get to a point where this certain young lady was someone who did a lot of baptisms, and they hailed her as being Spanish. Well, I did this research, right? It took me years. I have it written on paper at the house. Determined it wasn't part of our family line, but I ended up calling the mission and talking to them about this, and we found out that she was predominantly native. They thought she was Spanish. And the gentleman she married that helped turn that day, he basically saved the day. I mean, he saved many of the people who were, in the Presidio. Some things he did. He was actually of African descent. He was also thought to be Spanish. So now we've got a native woman and an African man who participated in huge turning events that were thought to have been Spanish. And now by talking to them, they as soon as I started talking, they were like, this is going to be complicated. I said, you bet it is. I go, but I'm going to give it all to you, and you do what you got to do with it. I'm not from that area. We'll let them, everybody figure it out down there. But yeah, it's wild, huh? Yeah. But that wasn't part of my family life. I'll go back. Just being honest. Yeah. But you gotta go do your homework.
I have a question. So I feel like that's a very important issue. It's something that happens a lot with people who find out that they have a bunch of different cultures, when they start doing research. And sometimes for some people, it could be very confusing because they no longer know what their identity is. Like we have some kind of lineage to, also some of my ancestors were colonizers and some of my were colonized, and there's a bunch of different blood, and I know a lot of people that feel like they don't have an identity. So what do you think about that? The people that feel.
I think if you're gonna go where your heart takes you, and I'm not going to say that someone can pursue it. I have that come up to me, and I'll explain that. If you're drawn to your native indigenous side, then go with it. I mean, for me, I had this. I could pick and choose, I guess, anything I want from my different lineages, right? The different races. I can trace some back to a lot of different places. But my connectivity has always been with the Azusa, the mountains, and the tribe, right? So it's integrated now, and that's who I am, and that's why I go for it. That's why you don't see me tribally hyphenated. I don't say Tongva Chumash or Tongva Kumeyaay or Apache Tongva. No, I'm part of the tribe, a specific role, okay? But I do look at all of the other, so all my lines I can go back up to 100 years. It took a long time. Yeah, it can get tough. I mean, what I explained earlier is that when Toy Farina is there at the mission, one of my great uncles is in charge of the soldiers. They fought each other. Then a couple of generations down, two of their descendants had children. Okay. If you look at my DNA, you'll see Sub-Saharan African blood, you'll see Spanish, Basque, Italian. My racial makeup looks like California. But where does my heart lie? Where's my passion? Go with it. Okay. The other thing too, I got indigenous people that are constantly on me about little things that is really frustrating. And again, it's like pick your battle, but know where you're coming from. I told you that I compete in powerlifting, right? So I've been on several U.S. teams, travel all over the world. One of the American flags I had came from a competition. It was hung in my gym. Oh man, talk about. And the whole LA native name thing came to a head. That was getting in inbox. Oh, you got an American flag, you're colonized. And how am I gonna break down to you the importance of that connection I have with that? Because we've been here all this time, we've been transitioning through all these different areas. Just because you just arrived recently doesn't mean you get to decide. Well, we've decided now over 4, 5, 6 generations. We served in the military, we fought along people of all the different races against, you know, in the wars America fought. Maybe they should celebrate more that a native person actually rose to that level of athletic inclusion. Instead, look at, you know, there's testament to they're able to succeed in something, to show something that's important. And now it goes back to that, unfortunately. Again, so going back to colonization and removing things, man, I just dropped some information most of you probably never heard of. That's why I'm saying you gotta take time to think first. Learn. So to answer that, I have to deal with that. But then there's a picture of me on one of the U.S. teams, and I'm there with all these people of different ethnicities. We're on the same team together. When I went and represented this country, I represented my neighborhood. I grew up in a barrio in Azusa. It was rough. Okay? There were a lot of different people there. Whether it's the res or the hood, same kind of problems go on. Just differences in connectivity with the culture. So when I left Azusa, I took with my whole community with me. GFW, American Legion, Helping Hand, you know, Parks and Recreation Cities, all the people who donated money to help get me there. All the people who gave me Jack in the Box sponsored, gave me free food. So how are you gonna say I'm not part of everybody? Chicano, Mexican, you know, Polynesian, white, it could be Irish, it could be German. They were all there supporting me. And I took that all of them with me. When I competed in the Soviet Union. So, and I haven't even gotten to the whole conversation of what, you know, about communism and socialism, and that's a real big topic for the digital today. I went behind the iron curtain. You might not meet a person that's done that. 2 weeks. Believe me, that American flag did mean something to me when I was in Russia. When I looked at it, 17,000 people all in red, and I could see the hammer and sickle hanging there. It's complicated, you know? But I got to defend myself against attacks over that. So, hey, just be proud of where you're from, and don't be afraid to be part of a lot of other people, different things. And if people, like I said before, want you to wake up angry every day, say, no, I'm not going to do that, because I don't need to carry that weight. We got enough stuff we got to carry as it is, just growing up here. I mean, heck, just all of other things aside, how tough is it to get going in California? It's expensive here. You got a lot of things you got to deal with. So we don't need to throw more on. You know? But that's a good question. That's a big challenge, man. How do you take all of that? Do you? Anybody tell you how you're going to do it?
I want to just validate some of the folks that have been commenting and on the chat. So Carlos Goitia, he's a director with Three Valleys Municipal Water District. He said, as an indigenous individual who grew up in Pomona, we never knew about the Tongva villages of Pemookanga and Toibina here in Pomona. We hope you can work together with us to educate the community here about these two important villages here. It's important to bring awareness and even get these locations recognized as to who the first people of this land are. It's sad that Pomona's history starts with the white settlers' history. I hope we can work together to change that. I always tell people that before this was Rancho San Jose, Spadra, and Pomona, this was Toibina and Pemookanga. And then another comment from Kahutu Mula. Please, he's a student from Mount Sac, please don't forget about the tile mosaic with the Mohawk Indian in front of the Mount Sac Library. So I get, there's a Mohawk Indian in front of the library. Okay. and then Eva mentioned Benito Juarez, Mexican president, and then Carlos Goitia again said, yeah, strong leadership. These are from 4:30 to 4:40, so it's a bunch of things that you mentioned. So we're nearing the end of the conversation here. I definitely want to respect everybody's time and get you all out of here by 5 p.m. So thank you so much, brother, for being here, bringing your son, and sharing with us, and sharing your passion, and being vulnerable with us. Really, I know nobody here takes that lightly, right? That vulnerability, so I really appreciate that. This is definitely a space for that, right? This is a brave space for everybody, to express themselves. And I appreciate you being real with us, man. That's stuff that is often hard to come by, right? And I know you set a great example in many different ways, brother. So I appreciate you having us here. And if it's okay with you, we could close it off, maybe with everybody kind of maybe we could take turns, go around and just like express one word that captures what you're feeling right now, or what you all feel about this talk right here. And Abe, if you would like to start us off, and then maybe we can go to the right, and then we can end with Kevin and his son.
Connection.
Let's say beautiful.
Grateful.
Inspired. Let's.
Gratitude. Helpful.
And folks right here in the chat, said, Eva said thank you, Annabelle said thank you, Carlos said thank you, Annabelle said Yamuene, and then Eva said planting semillas. And then if Kahutu wants to share a word. Leowana, which if I'm correct, if you don't recognize that word, then it might be Yoemi. Yeah. And then me, I feel my heart's full. You're smiling. Whatever.
Thank you all. So, for me, it's you're really nervous, And I get excited. Yeah, it evokes a lot of emotions, so I try to connect in a way to keep it real. Open up. When you open up, it's gonna be judged in a lot of different ways, but I'd rather be real so that you know where I'm coming from. Don't keep things on the shelf. But really grateful for giving the opportunity. I'm sure both my family have passed on, my tribe, my ancestors are equally grateful, thankful that they were remembered. Share that, build these relationships. Thank you.
I want to say thank you too. I don't say much because it's not my time in the space right now to really say too much. But Dad's moment to share what he's experienced in the dark and to be able to just have a voice of what he's done, what he's still doing. But I have a great teacher and I want him to know that. And It's not said enough. Kind of emotional, but I'm 22 and I see a lot. My dad went through a lot of stuff. But, you know, it's core of it's because we know who we are, our identity. And the whole strong to who we are, keep that alive. So, I want to say thank you to all you.
Thank you, brother.
That means that I hope that blessings follow you in a good way for all your time, all your wish gonna have these hard times. And always remember you can be strong, still the tears can flow. So not only be strong. Never.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. And then, you know, I know it's not much, but you know, this is just a small token of our appreciation. Abe has some stuff just so that you don't forget about us, man. And those are just, you know, some very small tokens of our appreciation. They represent us, the people in this room, you know, our at Centro, Mesa.
Thank you.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate you. Thank you for joining us. Everybody, please, you know, show them some love real quick. You know? Thank you. Thank you to everybody that joined us online. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this out, y'all. A lot of love from the folks online as well. Thank you. Thank you. All right, y'all. Thank you so much.